Toxic or trendy? What really makes a relationship toxic and how you can break free. Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast. I'm Claudia King, and today I have the pleasure of having another King join me today. This is Kate King. She is an author extraordinaire, and she's got some great things to share with us today. I'm going to start by giving a little information about Kate, and then she's going to share all of her wisdom with us. Kate is a licensed professional counselor and board certified art therapist with nearly 20 years of experience. She helps individuals heal their inner wounds so they can positively contribute to the evolving collective. Her work incorporates a dynamic synergy of brain and nervous system science, psychological teachings, spiritual practices, and art therapeutic creative expression to provide a unique and effective approach to healing and growth, personally and relationally. She is also a professional artist, podcast host, creative entrepreneur, and a multi-award winning author. And we're going to be talking about one of those amazing books today. And Kate is my neighbor. She lives in Morrison, Colorado. Kate, how are you today?
I am great today. Thank you for having me, Claudia. I'm excited to be here with you.
I am excited as well, Kate, because you talk about things that a lot of people are afraid to talk about. And I'm really excited for us to have this conversation for a lot of reasons. The first is your new book, Mend or Move On. This is such an amazing work that focuses around toxic relationships, but really talking about how to break free. Will you share a little bit about what inspired you to write this?
Yes. So this is my third book, and it honestly feels like I've been writing this book for my entire life. So it's sort of like a labor of love. As I share in the book, there's some personal experiences about my own relational healing, my experience with family estrangement. And so it's been a lot of years of doing my own work and clinically getting myself trained and experienced enough to really be able to pull the research and pull all of the skill set together and create something that I think speaks to where a lot of people are these days, where they just don't want to tolerate abuse or harm or dysfunction. They're starting to wake up to the awareness that there's something better and they can be healthier. They don't have to stay stuck in these relationships. And even if they're longtime family, longtime friendship, marriage or spousal partnership that's been going on for a long time, even professional connections, people are just kind of at this point where they don't want to do it. And so it feels like a very timely resource. And I tried to be very robust in the way that I brought it together so that it's applicable for all of these different situations. And it's also readable for the everyday person, even though it includes research and academic studies and nervous system science and all kinds of cutting edge, really exciting stuff. I wanted people to be able to digest it and to work through it. So that's a little bit about kind of what created this. It's kind of the relational self-help masterclass that came after my last book, The Radiant Life Project, which is the sort of inner work masterclass, everything you need to know from a therapist. The relationship piece needed its own book. So that's what this book is.
I love that you really dive into all kinds of relationships because I think a lot of times when people think about toxic relationships, they think of the traditional romantic relationship and they don't realize that really every kind of relationship can be toxic. Do you see people really starting to grasp that and look at other relationships in a different light now?
I do. I think at the core, connection is connection. And we're human beings. We're wired for it. We need it like food and water. Connection is so essential to our health and our safety and sense of belonging. And so, whether we're talking about platonic, romantic, familial, professional, it's connection. And so that's sort of how I see it. And I break down the different types of relationships that we have, the different levels of intimacy we can find, what to expect from different levels of intimacy too. because we can't be expecting every person in our life to be our deepest, most profound connection. We just don't have capacity for that. But to really recognize who is in that inner circle, most of us are unconscious about who our closest people are. We just sort of default to, mom, dad, sibling, spouse, best friend, and we don't really take a look at, does this person really have emotional safety for me or physical safety for me? Is this a relationship I'm choosing, or is it just this automatic default that's keeping me in this stuck place where I'm spiraling and looping and ultimately building inflammation in my body or mental illness or stress or burnout or exhaustion? And that's really, I think, where a lot of people are these days. Maybe it's post-pandemic even, that people are just like, why? Why am I not willing to do these things anymore? Why do I feel this level of unease or unsettlement or exhaustion? And I think a lot of it is because they've become aware of what relationships can really do to either nurture us or totally deplete and drain us.
So let's talk about that word toxic for a minute. So you and I were chatting a little bit earlier before we started this show, and I shared with you that I have a bit of a problem with the trendiness of a lot of these words lately, such as toxic, trigger, PTSD. From somebody who has experienced toxic relationships and someone who has PTSD, I get a little annoyed when I hear people say, oh gosh, I had to wait in line 10 minutes at the grocery store. I have PTSD now. So let's talk about toxic in that sense. What is a toxic relationship truly versus the relationship that people say is toxic, but really they just mean it's not a great relationship. Maybe it's not the preferred one, but it's not really going to damage you. Will you share a little bit about that difference?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time going into this in the book because you're right, it's such a problem and the internet really hasn't helped. There's this pop psychology trend along the internet where sort of there's all these self-proclaimed gurus and there's a life coach everywhere you look. And that's part of why I really wanted to create this distinction from a clinical therapeutic perspective, that not everyone's a narcissist. Not everything is toxic. You can be unhappy, you can be irritated, you can be annoyed, and it can not be toxic. So I think that's really important. And it's also an accountability piece where it's easy to blame other people and say, this relationship sucks. You're the narcissist, so it's your fault. Rather than, how did I co-create this? How have I played into this dynamic? Maybe I am showing manipulative tendencies, or maybe I'm using coercive control in places that I need to take ownership of, right? So I really try to reclaim that for people and help them see sort of the container where relationships are co-created. And also really knowing that tipping point when something is pathological, when it is truly a diagnosis like PTSD, like narcissism, right? So these are clinical terms that are being used flippantly all along the internet and across the media. And so I like to reclaim that in my book. So I actually have started both of my books with definitions, like on the very first page. And so when you get your copy of Mend or Move On, you can see my actual definitions of toxic, including dictionary definitions and toxic relationships and healthy relationships. But essentially, the biggest kind of discerning factors are these three that I outline. So the first is that the harmful behaviors are consistent and persistent. It's not a one-off thing. It doesn't happen occasionally. It's like every time you're with this person, this behavior is here. These abusive tendencies are present. It's so consistent that you could almost like set your watch by it. The second piece is that it's truly harmful on a deep level. It's abusive. It's not okay. It's not just that you're irritated, frustrated, annoyed. It's that you're literally calling your therapist after you see this person and you're like, I need you. I'm not okay. I'm picking up the pieces. I have insomnia from this. I'm losing weight from all the stress, or I'm drinking too much because I don't know how to be myself around this person. Like, this is abusive. And then the third piece is the somatic visceral experience in the body, because our mind knows how to lie to us. It knows how to be adaptive and manipulated. And our body doesn't do that. Our body puts up a red flag or stop sign, and it does so with sensations. And so this kind of push pull feeling, like you're being drawn towards someone, but you're also wanting to revolt. You're tired but wired. You feel this deep sense of obligation that's like a clench in your gut. That's your body talking to you and saying, this relationship doesn't feel good. This is my warning sign. Please listen before I have to start screaming at you in the form of like illness or mental illness. So those are kind of the top three.
In regards to a domestic violence relationship, so an actual romantic relationship that would be toxic per se, why do you think so many people stay despite all these signals and red flags? And even sometimes when they can say, "Oh, I see the red flags," and yet they stay anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why people get stuck. And I do have the seven traps of toxic relationships we can get into now or later, whatever you need. But essentially, I think there's a lot of things at play when domestic violence is on the table. And it is probably linked to unhealed trauma, which is one of the seven traps. When you're in a relationship that has those tendencies or that level of abuse, you were drawn into that for some reason. Something in that person mirrored a wound inside of yourself that was unhealed, that maybe felt normalized by your family. So these abusive tendencies might not feel that abnormal to you. And we tend to get really comfortable with what's familiar, even if it's actually harming us. And there might be roles being played here. Like there's the Cartman's drama triangle, the trauma triangle of victim and rescuer and perpetrator. And we kind of play these roles where there's this really beautiful recovery that sometimes happens after a period of abuse that keeps people, pumping oxytocin and dopamine through their system. They feel loved, they feel cared for, but only after there's been this cycle of abuse. And so there's this looping that starts to happen. And it can be really seductive to fall back into the most loving relationship you've ever felt. And unfortunately, it comes after the most abusive relationship you've ever felt, right? So there's a lot of factors that play in as well. I mean, when we're talking about spousal relationships, there are financial implications. There is maybe custody issues with the kids you don't want to have to deal with. Maybe you're worried about family ties or group of friends. Like there's so much embedded in a romantic partnership, especially if it's been long lasting and you've really built a life together, that it's not so easy to just walk away from that. It takes preparation, it takes care. Sometimes it takes protective mechanisms that you have to plan a strategy for yourself so that you can actually stay safe in your freedom from them. So it's complex.
I love that you have mentioned a couple times personal responsibility within these relationships because I think that's hard sometimes for people to accept. When we think about a domestic relationship or domestic abuse, you never want to say the victim is to blame. However, I completely agree with you that they were drawn into that relationship for a reason, for something inside of them that isn't healed yet. And if they don't heal that, they're going to continue that pattern. So they're playing a part in at least entering that relationship. Do you also see that it's really hard for people to accept that and to get that so that they can get out of that going forward?
Yes, I mean, part of it is that if it's a really dangerous, coercive, controlling relationship, the person has been basically manipulated to feel small and powerless. And so they're sort of working against that too. The dynamic in the relationship has prevented them from feeling empowered, even to do their own work, to seek help, right? So it's like built into the dynamic to keep them in the dynamic because that keeps the controlling person in power over them. Why would that person want them to heal? That would disrupt their dynamic and suddenly they wouldn't be in control anymore. So it's like swimming upstream, but only for the first chapter of this. Once these like victim people start to gain their empowerment and start to feel like, wait a second, I don't have to do this, or if I could just push a little harder, do you actually think I could break free from this? then it's like a snowball effect in a positive way where the momentum starts to build. They gain courage, they build some community around this, they start talking to other people and they don't feel so alone, and outside perspectives of their relationship are offered to them where people are saying, no, this isn't okay, and no, this isn't how it has to be. And so sort of brick by brick they start to build their inner strength, and then they can call a therapist or a coach or someone, a group, someone. They just have to start. And once you start, like with so many things, it gets easier.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier the seven traps of toxic relationships, and I would love if you would share those because I think it's so important for people to understand
Mhm.
why they're ending up where they're ending up and then what is keeping them there.
Yes. So I defined these seven traps because they're so consistent and they're so common across all populations. I've seen so many diverse people, and these are the traps. Like, this is really what keeps people stuck. So, this is kind of like my net that captures, and a lot of it we've talked about already, but the first one is buy in. It's essentially buying into the narrative of this type of relationship's okay, or you deserve this, or you should tolerate this, not questioning that maybe this isn't how it should be. That buy in piece is really empowering for the dysfunction because if you're not going to question it, if you're not going to rethink what you've been told, then how are you ever going to advocate for change? Right? So buy in is the first trap. The second is comfort. We alluded to this a little bit talking about the domestic violence piece, but this can happen in all relationships, even if domestic violence isn't present. This is essentially when someone is so comfortable in the dynamic, it's like an old pair of jeans, and they're like, you know, it's good enough. It's okay. I'm so comfortable here, even if it's dysfunctional, even if it's unhealthy. The unfamiliar future and the unknown of what could be without this is so terrifying that they'd rather just succumb to what's comfortable, even if it's unhealthy. And sometimes that happens unconsciously. This isn't not always somebody has awareness of this. So always know that there's the conscious and the unconscious playing, in the dynamic. The third is powerlessness. So we spoke to this as well. This is kind of present in those really abusive relationships, especially when there's control dynamics, when there's manipulation at play. If they can keep you feeling powerless, then you can continue this dynamic that ultimately works for the abuser. And so powerlessness is one of those traps that is so sticky to get out of because you've been sort of trained to be a certain way in the dynamic, and likely you are powerless in more than just this dynamic. You've acted this out in your other relationships and your friendships, and so you're working against all these relationships that are essentially telling you the same narrative that you have to be small, you have to be powerless, so you have to allow yourself to be controlled so that you can feel safe and loved and have a sense of belonging. Sticky trap. The fourth one is called false ownership. So this is essentially when someone is like, it's all my fault. The whole relationship, all the bad things, all the dysfunction, if I could just change myself, if I could find that magic thing or that perfect therapy or that issue with me, everything will be better and I will be happy. And this is a sticky trap because it is never one person's fault. It is always a relational dance between people. And so when one person in the partnership is refusing accountability and they're saying, this is you, and it is blame and it is aggression and it is accusation, and you internalize that, then you get stuck in this false ownership trap. The fifth one is unhealed trauma, which we've alluded to as well. So if you're not healing your own material, and like, let's be honest, we've all got unhealed material. This is life. It's hard. We come up against barriers. We fractal off into traumatized pieces of ourselves. And as an adult, it's our responsibility to meet those broken pieces of ourselves and help reintegrate them. And it doesn't always mean therapy. Sometimes this means journaling. Sometimes it means honest conversations with trustworthy people, but you have to work on yourself because whatever your material is in the light or in the shadow, that's what you're bringing into your relationships. That's your contribution. And so if you're seeing your relationship through the lens of your unhealed trauma, it's going to perpetuate that, and it's going to continue to reflect that and project outwardly and potentially trigger their unhealed trauma. And then you're just in potentially a trauma bond, potentially escalating together in this really unhealthy spiral. So when you heal your trauma, you plug into your relationships from a healthier place, and that's what you contribute. The sixth trap is avoidance. This is basically what it sounds like. Like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to look at this. I don't want to work that hard. I don't want to admit that there's an issue. And this can happen unconsciously as well, where people are just sort of like status quo, like autopilot, keep going because it feels maybe terrifying on some level to really admit what's going on. And you might even be told from people who see you and love you that they see problems, and you're like, nah, this is fine. You're wrong. We're good. So avoidance can bleed out into relationships as well, but it can be a really tough trap to get free from. And then the last one is codependency. So this is essentially when you lose your edges of where you end and they begin, and you start functioning as like one symbiotic organism, and you forget that you're two autonomous people. So like, I'm not okay unless you're okay, and until you're okay, I can't be okay, and I'm so invested in you that I don't even know who I am anymore. That's codependency. So I like to work with a model from Dr. Dan Siegel towards what he calls interdependency, which is that healthy state where you can flow in relationship, you lean on each other, you help each other, support each other, but you remain autonomous individual beings. You don't lose your sense of I and self in this relationship. So that was a mouthful, but those are the 7 traps.
That was fantastic, though, because, when you talk about them, it seems so logical. It makes so much sense. And yet, so many of us still miss these traps, or we see them in everybody else, but we miss them in ourselves. Why is it so hard to be introspective? Why is it so hard to examine our own selves and our relationships as easily as we, clearly can judge and examine everyone else's?
Well, there's that saying, you can't see the forest from the trees. Sometimes we're just so in our own experience, it's difficult to see it from the outside. And that's why it's important to have healthy relationships or objective relationships, like one with a therapist, that can really tell you objectively what's going on from the outside, because sometimes we truly can't see it. We have a lot of blind spots, and healing happens in layers. So it's possible that you have not healed to the layer where you can be honest with yourself to the extent where you can see the truth. And some things have to happen so that other things can happen, and that works in healing too. So sometimes you have to be in the hard relationship for way too long to get to the breaking point or the rock bottom place where you're finally willing to see something. And it takes as long as it takes. Like, there's no timeline, there's no one size fits all for this. It's really about being ready. And I never force people into walking away from a relationship or seeing something they're not ready to see, because it's not helpful to destabilize someone's nervous system. So I always trust the wisdom of someone's nervous system. And if there's resistance, and if they say, no, I don't want to do that, or I can't see that, or I'm not ready for that, I honor that, because I trust that if we are ready, then we go deeper. And if we are not ready, then we get curious about the layer we're at. And that layer will eventually allow us to move through it once it feels trusting and healed enough on that nervous system level.
It seems like when people are ready to see what's going on and make changes, that they're able to do that in most types of relationships. But there's one type of relationship that I see quite commonly where a lot of times people refuse to change because they think they can't. And that is a familial relationship. And we know that toxicity occurs, as you mentioned, in every single type of relationship. But so many of us have been brought up or just feel like, well, that's my family. I can't do anything about that. I can't set boundaries. I can't walk away from them. Will you talk a little bit about that situation and why that is more harmful than putting on your big girl panties and figuring out how to put up those boundaries and walls and get away from that toxicity, even though it's family.
Yes. So sometimes family is kind of the last one you get to. I've seen this happen where, like you said, these toxic relationships could be in so many places of your life. And so people will become aware first where they're like, oh, I keep attracting the same type of friendship over and over, and it has this pattern, and now I see it. And so they might spend years working on how to have healthy friendship, not even realizing that they have this unhealthy family yet. They're just working on friendship. And then it comes into dating, and they're like, oh my gosh, these friendship patterns are also showing up in my relationship patterns romantically. Wow. And then suddenly they're getting healthier on that level. And then finally they're like, oh my God, I have a parent or a sibling or a grandparent or a whole system of family that are literally mirroring exactly what I've been working through with my friends and my romantic relationships. Holy moly, how did I not see this? And it's because family is the deepest blueprint. It's encoded into your DNA, right? These are your original connections that taught you what relationship is, what connection is, what safety in the world is, and how it's related to connection. So those are the last relationships that you want to lose because they're of such extreme and crucial importance and they're so embedded into who you are. So that's why they can be painful. And that's why there's also sometimes a runway that leads people to the readiness to really look at that. And then once they start to look at that, they might feel resistance from the family when, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so aware. Our family has these issues. We're so dysfunctional. Let's work on this. And then the family is like, what are you talking about? I don't want to work on that, or I don't want to see that. There's the avoidance trap, right? Like, this is you. You're the scapegoat. You're the black sheep. You're the one who's never fit in. That's the false ownership trap, right? So a lot of the resistance that will come from a family that doesn't want to change can be gaslighting. It can be confusing. And so then you have to do your work there around finding your truth, finding what's authentic to you, learning how to trust your inner compass, even if your family system doesn't agree on what you're trying to say. And this is the point of either mending or moving on that some people get to where they might be met with openness from their family, where the family is like, yeah, I noticed that too. Like, let's heal this. I'm willing. I don't know how, but let's figure this out. That is the ingredient right there for repair. But in other families, they want to scapegoat, they want to blame, they want to remain in their kind of, I don't want to look at myself place. And that's where people who eventually choose estrangement ultimately end up where they're like, this is never going to change. So it's really complicated with family.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's another layer to it because it's family. And you don't feel bad typically, if you end a friendship. I mean, you feel loss and you might be upset because you've lost that friendship, but with family, I think a lot of times there's a guilt layer to it because it's family and because so much of society is telling you, well, that's your family. You got to have them around. Don't you want to see your dad before he dies? What if you never talk to him again? And yet, dad is somebody you need to move on from.
Mhm.
How do people figure out how to deal with that guilt, whether internal or external, when they're making that necessary decision to move on?
You're so right. The guilt, I think, comes from internally and it also comes from outside. And so it's kind of like everywhere you look, you're almost in like a house of mirrors where you're like, oh, does anyone think this is a good idea? Right. And if you look closely enough, you will find people who support you and who see your reality. But there's a lot of cultural undercurrents that, we have these truisms like blood is thicker than water, family is family no matter what, right? There's like these elements of family as this sacred thing. And it is. And that's why it's so painful when you have to walk away from it because the ideal is like, yeah, we should never have to make this decision. These should be our closest relationships. These are our primary people. Like, why are we even having this conversation? And here in reality, sometimes those are really unhealthy people, and you do have to have this conversation. And so that guilt that so many people feel, I just want to normalize it first of all. Like, it makes sense that you would feel a sense of guilt. And guilt is not always the compass for what is right for us. Sometimes it's linking us into these standards we've been taught, the overculture of like the narrative of family, or the thing that we've sort of known deep down we've always needed to do, but never really wanted to have to do it because it's scary, it's sad, it's hard, it's painful. It leaves a void. When you cut off from family, you don't just fill that void with anybody else. You sort of learn to live with that void because you can't replace your mom. You can't replace these people, right? So I think the guilt is normal. And it's also your responsibility to learn how to lean into it and to get curious about it, to take it to a professional who knows how to help you kind of get that curiosity about it, not just repress the guilt. We don't want to put anything in like the basement because those things tend to bubble up at inopportune moments. But if we can lean into it, I like a parts perspective with this from an internal family systems model where you see the part of you that's feeling guilty and you realize, I am not feeling guilty. A part of me is feeling guilty. And by seeing it that way, I'm more able to have compassion for that part, curiosity about why that guilt is coming up, and I can work with it with more clarity, with more creativity, and ultimately reintegrate that part for healing inside of the system of myself. So, does that answer your question about guilt?
Absolutely. And I just want to say, because there's always going to be people out there that will say, yeah, Kate, that's easy for you to say until you do it. And for me, I want to say, I have done it. I have had to remove family members from my life, sibling from my life, and their whole family. And it is difficult and there is guilt. But I am in such a better place now, and I have been able to really see additional harmful behaviors that were occurring that I was allowing to occur from this person that was degrading, disrespectful, something that I would never allow anyone else to do, yet I was allowing this person to treat me in that way. And so the feeling of freeness and independence in realizing all that was remarkable for me. Do other people have a similar experience that you've worked with when they do make that decision to move on from a really toxic family relationship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've lived this personally as well. I have core family members who I am estranged from, who I don't really think we will ever be able to find repair. And I have one lovely, amazing family member who I was estranged from, who I have created repair with, and this person is back in my life. And so I've really lived both of these on a very personal level with family. And I can say, yeah, I absolutely can relate to how that feels. Once you break free, you have so much more clarity, and you're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't allowing myself to see so much. And you also find aspects of yourself that have been kind of like covered in the muck of the dysfunction, and you are in such an adaptive place of survival in that relationship that really core elements of yourself got lost. So for me, it was really funny because I've been with my husband for 24 years, and so he's really seen the evolution of my experience with my family. And it wasn't until after I broke free from these toxic family members that he was like, you are funny. Like, where is this sense of humor coming from? I have never seen this in you before. And it was like by lifting the weight of having those people, it allowed me to come into contact with my sense of humor and a lightness because I had been so serious, so intense, so heavy, so focused on survival. I didn't know that I had numbed these parts of myself that were ultimately, so bright and so happy and so light. And so I think it really shows up for people differently. Sometimes when someone cuts ties, they go into like a fear spiral and they're like, how am I going to do this? Other people feel such a sense of relief. I remember feeling this, and as an art therapist, I do a lot of my own expressive art. I felt such lightness in my physical body. I created this image of like these feet kind of grounding into the earth with like balloons trying to lift it up because that's how I felt. I was like, I feel so light. I don't even know what to do here. And it was a good feeling, but it was uncomfortable because I had felt so heavy in my physical body for so long. So I think, having all of these different responses is normal and it makes sense. And you're probably going to respond in ways that might surprise you or be unexpected. And I would say that's why it's important to have supportive people for this whole process. Because if you do respond in a way where you're like, I'm not good, you need to have somewhere where you can take that so that you're not in it alone. Someone who can support you or talk to you about it, hold space for you, show up for you. And, for me, I've had a wonderful therapist for so many years, and I'm glad that I had her. I have some really beautiful friendships that were supportive. My husband was really incredibly supportive. So I'm grateful to have built healthy connections before I let go of my toxic ones so that they could be a safety net for landing.
I just want to take a moment for the people who are listening and not watching to say, Kate just mentioned she and her husband have been together 24 years. They clearly got together when Kate was 12 because she's so young, you guys. I don't even know how that's possible. Moving on. Just wanted to put that out there. You
I was
mentioned,
not a child bride, I promise. But yeah, we met when I was 18. It was like we met so young.
but sometimes when you know, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and that was kind of a fated thing because that was when I was so steeped in the dysfunction of my family system. It is a miracle that I ended up with a healthy spouse. Like, I'm like, how did this happen? What angels were helping here? Because clearly it would have been really easy for me to end up with somebody just like my family because at that time I hadn't done the healing work to recognize it yet. So I'm grateful for him every day and for how he has really shown me what healthy connection is.
I love that because we don't cheer on our significant others as much as we should sometimes, I think. We spend so much time talking about the bad ones and, all the terrible things that a lot of people are doing that we don't celebrate the good ones. So, Kate and I, just for 1 second, are going to celebrate the good men in our lives. Okay. You mentioned both types of issues here with your family, or not issues, but resolutions, a mend and a move on, or a future mend, I would say, without, trying to dive into the healing tactics of all different types of family relationships. How do you know that there might be a chance one day to mend, or this is just going to be a move on and I just need to close the door forever? Or is it always like that and that door is always cracked open?
I think there's only one ingredient that needs to be present for repair, and it's willingness. And it's really as simple as that. And in my experience, this person who I had repair with wasn't willing for like the first year of estrangement. We were estranged for a year and a half. And he was not willing. He was angry. He was blaming, very defensive, told me that there's a special place in hell for me. And, really just very, very shaming of my decision. And I felt kind of the relationship with this person was the close one that I was really mostly grieving. And I think I always felt like I wanted to leave a crack just in case he could do this work. And I thought, there was like no chance in hell he was going to do this work. He was stuck in his own powerlessness trap. He was in all the traps. And I left space because I thought, sometimes lightning strikes twice in the same place and miracles happen. And then I set some boundaries for myself where I would receive his text messages And if they were healthy or productive, I would respond in a kind way. If they were not healthy or productive, I would not respond. I would not see him. There were a lot of, really clear boundaries. So for a while, it was like, once a month, there would be a text that would be like, I miss you. Like, I'm thinking of you. Sometimes. And other times it would be like, how can you do this? Why are you like this? And so if it was like the I'm thinking of you, I miss you, I would be like, yeah, this is really sad and I miss you too. And that's where it would end. And out of the blue, unexpectedly, one day I got a letter from him in the mailbox. And it was basically like, I'm so sorry. And I see that there are major things wrong here, and I don't totally understand them, but I want to learn. And I've been seeing my own therapist, and I understand that I'm part of the problem. I don't really understand how or why, but I want to learn. Like, please help me. Please connect with me. And that was all I needed. Where then we had this very slow process of reintegration where we met. My husband came with me as like my wingman. We met for a meal. It was really awkward. It was really hard. And we kind of built from there. This person did not get to see my children for a while until I was really sure because I didn't want to yo yo my children back and forth. And I really committed to being open with my kids this whole time because I was raised with a lot of secrecy and I didn't want to do that to them. So they are aware of what's been going on and they've watched this healing. And then that moment where I reintegrated this person with my kids was, I'll remember it forever. It was one of the sweetest, most heart-wrenching moments of my life. And I was really proud of them for coming forward and being willing. I was proud of this person for healing. And it was all because there was willingness. Whereas with the other people, there has never been a shred of willingness. They are so committed to their rigid perspective that they are wrong, that I am wrong, they are right. They are good. I am bad. I am the villain. They did nothing wrong. Like they're so committed to that, there's no room. And so that door stays closed.
Do you encourage people to go into this estrangement with the thought that the door will stay closed? As in, if they have hope, they might be disappointed?
Mm. Hope is like Hope is like a little flicker of light that I don't like to put out because I think hope it's strong and it's powerful. So I don't recommend that people put their hope out. I recommend that they put a protective bubble of light around their hope and they keep it to whatever degree feels safe and comfortable and healthy for them. I don't think we should be living on hope because yes, that can create a lot of disappointment, resentment, pain. It can also make us collapse back into relationships that are really unhealthy because we're so hopeful for change that we're not actually seeing the truth. So keep hope. We want hope, but keep boundaries around it for yourself and have those safe people who you can talk to about your hope. So, like, I would always, talk to my husband or to my friends about, like, gosh, I hope my family member can come around. I hope they can do the work. And I understand that until they can, this door is closed, right? So for people listening, you may find that there are people where you're really hopeful for and close to, and you think there might be a chance. Protect the hope there. And you also might find like there's no hope here. These relationships are dead. Like the ashes of these relationships are dead. And there may not even be hope. Like I don't have that little flicker of hope for these other family members because the relationships were so toxic that it burned the hope there. And so there's really nothing to nurture or protect. And those doors are pretty well closed.
If someone is realizing that they are in a toxic relationship, and whatever relationship that might be, what is one simple step that they can take today or tomorrow to start the process of getting to the point they need to be to mend or move on?
I mean, honestly, read my book. I think start to educate yourself a little bit because in that moment of like, oh my gosh, I think this is really unhealthy, that's a really powerful place to gather information. And some of the information will come from your internal experience. So go to your journal, talk to your friends, like be like, whoa, I just realized this, and these are the things that I'm recognizing are not okay. And then go to a credible, trustworthy place like my book or another therapist's book or a podcast like this one, and start to learn a little bit more about what this world looks like so that you can make your decision informed by research, by nervous system and brain sciences, like really understanding what's going on the mental, emotional, and physical and spiritual levels so that you don't do something impulsive or you don't kind of freeze and paralyze. We all have our fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. These are
Mhm.
survival responses. And it's not uncommon for someone to fall into a survival response once they realize that a relationship that they've relied on is so unhealthy that suddenly they can't rely on it. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So gather information. It would be a great opportunity to bring a therapist on board, have that objective opinion because you're going to need it. You're going to need the support. Sometimes this is the fight of your life to break free from these people, and you do not want to do that alone, and you certainly don't have to.
This book is not just a pretty face, let me say, and it is a pretty face because pink, I am loving it. If people are ready, Kate, where can they grab Mend or Move On?
It is sold everywhere books are sold. So go to your favorite local bookstore or Amazon or wherever. You can also get it from my website, which is theradiantlifeproject.com. And I'm so excited to say I just got a contract for an audiobook. So I do not know when the audiobook's coming out, but for those of you who love to sort of listen on the go, that will be offered in the next probably 6 months or so.
I love that. And are you going to be narrating that or reading it, I
No,
guess?
I know. I thought that would be amazing. These audiobook publishers have their voice actors that are really good at their job. And for my last audiobook for the Radiant Life Project, they actually went onto my Instagram and like listened to my voice and my mannerism and tried to choose an audiobook narrator who sort of sounded like me. And I'd say they did pretty well. It's kind of neat how they can do that. So it won't be my voice, but it will be my words.
Absolutely. I love that. That is very exciting because I know a lot of people don't like the actual book anymore. They just want to put it in their ear, listen while they're driving, when they're going to sleep, whatever. You
Mhm.
mentioned your website, Kate. Is there anywhere else people can find you? So if they have connected with you, which I don't see how they couldn't have, and they want to know more, where can they find you?
So the website, theradiantlifeproject.com, is kind of my hub. It's where I put all my conversations like this and all my events and things like that. So definitely check that out. And also, I'm active on social media. My handle is the Radiant Life Project, and I try to just put daily little tidbits out to support and guide and nourish people's empowerment, really help them find their strength and not feel alone. So you can find me on socials, you can find me on my website. Yeah, theradiantlifeproject.com.
And you can find her in Morrison, but that might be creepy. Kate, you have been absolutely amazing. I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with me today and for sharing so much incredible information with our audience. I know that this is really going to hit people in the right way and give them the tools that they need to start seeing the real toxic relationships in their lives and not just see them, but know what they can do to make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been so lovely.